Greetings, my name is Ryan Nix. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. Joining me here today is Matt. Matt, say hi.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Slaughton. I'm a principal solution architect here at Veeam Kasten. I focus primarily on our Kubernetes data protection solution.
Cool. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes unpacking some hybrid use cases. We're going to talk about some application modernization customers in a hybrid context, how they ended up there. Let's talk about DR and high availability for hybrid use cases. Then I think let's poison the water a little bit with virtualization on Kubernetes. In a hybrid context, how do we protect that? So most of the customers, all of the customers I work with are in a hybrid use case. They have ended up there. Some of them are there because of a long-term migration strategy. They've adopted the cloud as part of their modernization strategy, and they are gradually moving things in because they cannot move their entire 40, 50-year empire overnight. So there are things that are going to be going into the cloud today, and there are things that are going to be going into the cloud tomorrow. And while that is taking place, they have workloads in two different locations, and they need to protect both. So an on-premises and typically a cloud, AWS in this case.
It's difficult to P2V a mainframe. So yeah, that's a good
well, that's an interesting one, because I mean that puts it into the bucket of customers who have things that seemingly are never going to move because they are just so difficult to, or they require a massive amount of effort. So then they definitely are not a short-term candidate for relocation. And then there are customers where there is some sort of regulatory compliance that says I have to be able to, at the very least, showcase I can run in multiple locations, if not actually run in multiple locations. But in my case, all of my customers are hybrid, and they have something that's driving them there. The hybrid itself is not the be-all and end-all. It's more a situational thing. Let's talk about what are some of the building blocks that customers have in a hybrid context, and shall we say, you know, we've got an on-premises, we've got an AWS. What is currently in play there, and what do we have to protect? So if I have a look at a typical customer of mine, I have a on-prem environment. There's a lot of infrastructure here. As they're moving into the cloud, adopting AWS over here, first things first, we're going to have some form of connectivity between these two environments. This is normally going to be something like an Amazon Direct Connect, might be VPN backup over there. We've got all of the usual suspects. We've got identity providers, directory services, DNS, networking, security. I'm not worried about those. Let's zoom in on the applications. For most of the customers I work with, there is an investment into a modernization strategy, so there is something Kubernetes. I see a lot of OpenShift. There's a mentality around OpenShift being the same user experience, whether it's on premises or whether it's on the cloud. So I tend to see a little bit of like OpenShift OCP on premises, and then when we go to the AWS side of things, it's more of a managed option over there. So I do see things like OCP coming into the picture over here, and we see ROS on that side. It's not to say we don't see OCP on AWS. Yep. Customers are just moving towards, can I get a managed option? And if for some or other reason that doesn't fit into their requirements, they'll then collapse back to a self-managed version of OpenShift. Now, when we're protecting just about anything, a backup and recovery solution becomes fundamental. But I want to look at this in the context of Kubernetes. Veeam Kasten can be deployed onto Kubernetes. Am I correct in saying that it's the exact same thing? It's the same product, same provisioning process. It's an operator or a Helm chart, and we install it into the cluster itself.
Exactly, yep. So we can be deployed to EKS, we can deploy to OpenShift, to vanilla Kubernetes, any CNCF compliant distribution of Kubernetes. We can deploy via Helm chart. In the case of OpenShift, we do have an operator to help simplify things.
Where are on-premises customers storing their data for their application workloads? And more importantly, where are they storing the configuration for their backup restore processes. So, and I'm thinking in the case of like, if I need to rebuild this backup solution, how do I go about that? I'm dreading something SAN, NFSE. What is going on here?
Yep. Yeah. So we see a lot of customers leveraging on-premises solutions, their existing storage arrays for Kubernetes storage, right? So the CSI standard's been fantastic, right? That gives us a lot of capabilities that standardizes across arrays, where Kubernetes can natively talk to the underlying storage, and we, from a Kasten perspective, can protect it.
So this could be something like a storage area network, or it could be something like NFS. If I remember correctly, Veeam Kasten's configuration is going to be here inside NFS.
So the configuration that we can back up to typically goes to an S3 or S3 compatible, or it can go to NFS.
Okay, so interesting that you mentioned S3. So a on-premise customer could actually go and take something like a S3 bucket inside AWS and actually connect that back to their environment. Back up to that. What I like about that is it protects you against the failure of your on-premises storage, or if you have a catastrophic shenanigan here on-premise, the information's already in the cloud. Most of my customers are running workloads on both sides. So I would see workloads running here on ROSA, workloads running here on OCP, and I would see Veeam Kasten deployed there again, and this Veeam implementation probably also backing up into that S3 location. They just have different sources, but this is not the same Veeam Kasten. This is an instance of Veeam Kasten and a separate instance of Veeam Kasten. So does a backup admin have to then manage these as a one-to-one thing, or is there some sort of overarching single pane of glass, if you will?
There is, I hate the term single pane of glass, but I will use it in this case. Yes, we have a multi-cluster manager, essentially where we can define global policies, global location profiles. So we ensure that when we deploy Kasten, those policies apply to all the specific instances. So especially for our customers that have large edge footprints or large just hybrid footprints, it becomes very important to have that single pane of glass so we can manage that.
The multi-cluster manager, is that part of Veeam Kasten, or is it an add-on sort of feature product set?
It's actually part of Veeam Kasten. You typically elect one instance to be the main instance of multi-cluster manager.
And then you'd register all of the others to it. Okay, so very much like every other Kubernetes, but this is specific to the backup and DR. It's not managing the cluster, it's not managing other components.
Exactly.
So for most of my customers, they are adding in another layer to this. We will see something like a Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager, or RACM. Similar notion here. You install RACM onto one of your OpenShift environments, and then it will manage all of your different OpenShift implementations over here. Can I abbreviate multi-cluster manager as literally MMC, or do you have a interesting...
MCM, I think, would be, And worth mentioning too, because I'm glad you brought up RACM, we absolutely integrate with RACM as well. So if you were deploying new clusters and trying to manage them via RACM, because Kasten is cloud native and a Kubernetes native application, we speak native Kubernetes, which means you can actually provision both the cluster as well as register it into multi-cluster manager, all via programmatically.
Okay, so there's two layers here. I mean, you've got the policies and things here in Veeam that dictate what do I back up, where do I back up, all of that. So you can standardize that across all of your backup systems.
Yep.
The interaction between Red Hat's Advanced Cluster Manager and MCM is interesting to me, because that means as I deploy subsequent Kubernetes environments, I can pull the config from there, and RACM can actually go and deploy my Veeam operator and pre-configure it. That's very, very cool automation for customers who are scaling out more and more as part of their empire.
Worth mentioning too, so for those that are interested in that use case, validatedpatterns.io, which is a Red Hat kind of property or Red Hat solution that essentially you can create what's called a validated pattern to roll out your software solution.
Yeah, similar to what we would on AWS call a landing zone or a preconceived building block of implementation.
Exactly.
This is also very compelling for customers who are like SaaS providers or even cloud center of excellences where they're rolling out the same building blocks for different divisions of a company. You're not using one OpenShift, you're deploying one for your sales and marketing team, then another team comes along. And what we typically see is this combined with something like AWS organizations or AWS Control Tower, where you're building out an AWS account, the underlying networking of that, you're linking it into your connectivity, and then you're deploying OpenShift and your backup and DR into there. Does the backup location and the storage options become a relevant concern for hybrid customers? Because we're going to have a slightly different storage on premises to what we have in the cloud. To me, it sounds like it's largely irrelevant because everything that is going to be backed up is going to come into S3. Or is there an edge case here?
There are edge cases specifically around specific configurations of Kubernetes applications, right? So on premises, you might be using a specific storage class. Maybe it's a traditional SAN array with a CSI driver. Whereas when we have a hybrid cloud and go into something like ROSA, maybe we're using something like FSX or EFS. So when we go to restore those workloads into our public cloud, we need to ensure that we change dynamically that storage class so we know that our PVC can be mapped.
Okay, so for my hybrid customers and in a migration context, as they're gradually moving workloads into their cloud estate, they don't need to go and refactor the backup dramatically. They could actually use the backup as part of a lift and shift migration process. S3 is very common for a lot of different things. It's a tremendously popular storage option. What stops accidental change of the information that is in there that relates to a backup? I'm thinking bucket policies, IAM policies. Is there anything in Veeam Kasten itself that also adds a layer of protection?
So certainly, I guess our ability to leverage S3 object lock to ensure that we have ransomware protection, right? So we often say we are the last line of defense against ransomware because in the, God forbid, in the event of a ransomware attack, you want to make sure that you're recovering from a source that is a known good. So Kasten's ability to leverage object lock with an S3 is our kind of conduit into having that. And we can leverage also IAM as well, so you don't have to use long-lived keys or anything like that from a security perspective.
We also got the ability here within S3 to have those multiple tiers of storage, and S3 being able to dynamically see this was an object that wasn't interacted with, so it becomes shifted to a more cost-effective layer of storage. So this almost becomes a dynamically scaling, cheaper and cheaper over time for those backups that are almost archiving in nature, where they're not being interacted with on a regular basis. Regulatory compliance, anything that it needs to be backed up and persisted for several years that you're not going to update and recycle. What am I missing in terms of typical app modernization workloads that is also hybrid? When we think about things such as image repositories, are you seeing a centralized image repository, or is there an image repository on-prem and a separate one on cloud, and are we backing those up through something like Veeam Kasten as well?
We can. So in the case of OpenShift, we support an image stream, which is a great way to ensure that we protect your repository. In an ideal world, there'd be one repository that we're protecting for an entire organization. What we actually see is sometimes a little bit more checkered. Maybe we're using ECR, maybe we're using image stream within OpenShift, or maybe we're running our own repository solution, like a JFrog or something like that, on premises. So long story short, yes, we can protect those images, but being Kubernetes, we don't typically look at, we look at containers as essentially ephemeral, right, or immutable as well. So we protect the actual data and metadata around those container images. We don't typically protect the container images except in the case of image stream.
Do we care about relational databases that live on opposite sides here? So we're going to absolutely have relational data on both sides, but they more often are not relating to different applications. So I'm assuming that there's a backup of the relational database on this side and there's a different. Is that Veeam Kasten, or is that a different product that is in control of that?
Yep. So we can absolutely do it with Veeam Kasten. We can provide logical and application consistent backups. So we can actually do things like PG dump or do a Mongo dump or something like that, and then actually restore that native database data into a destination. So we can do that with Veeam Kasten. There are also solutions we have backup for AWS as well, which is a Veeam solution outside of Kasten. So there's a plethora of opportunities to use here, but a lot of tools for the best.
There's a couple of things that are standing out here for me. First is, if I look at customers that have a modernization path, cloud absolutely becoming part of that, Kubernetes becoming part of that. Many of the customers that I'm working with are in a hybrid context, and then we start seeing things in terms of having a backup and recovery strategy that caters for both sides of my empire, wherever I exist. I love the MCM concept, having that overarching management layer, so repeatability, rollout, and consistency. And we're going to get that from Red Hat's Multicluster Manager as well, when we look at how do I manage a fleet of OpenShift. A new topic that is coming up is I'm seeing a lot of customers gravitate towards shifting their virtualization investment into something that is Kubernetes based. So I'm seeing a lot of OpenShift virtualization, which builds on top of KubeVirt. This is open.
Yeah, and I love this as part of a modernization story, because we look at now VMs running in Kubernetes is essentially we can use Kubernetes as that platform for our organization as we mature, right? So maybe day one is we just literally lift and shift for our traditional virtualization infrastructure onto OpenShift Virt. And then once we're on OpenShift, we can then start refactoring applications, maybe slowly start piecewise containerizing some of those application functions. So as we move, we need to ensure from the platform perspective and backup perspective that we can protect both VMs and containers and these hybrid apps that are spread across.
Well, these virtual machines, once they're inside OpenShift virtualization, they're essentially containerized workloads. So if you're protecting app mod workloads here built for the customer themselves, the vast majority of the building blocks apply here.
Yes.
So we've got a very effective layer of protection here. What I do see is customers tend to adopt this virtualization strategy on premises first. Does Veeam become a potential accelerator to be able to cross the boundary into AWS? Because in this case, we're talking about a potential lift and shift migration of something almost identical.
Yeah. So the beauty of supporting hybrid cloud is that, yes, we can move and restore those workloads across different infrastructure, across from on-premises into the public cloud. So Kasten can essentially be that conduit to move those workloads into.
So this is a little bit different. So for most of my customers, they've got workloads running here and they've got separate workloads running here. This is a case of I need to back up both of those and restore both of those. But in this case, this could literally be, I need to back up and restore this here, but I could actually make use of my AWS environment as a DR strategy where I would fail over to there. How do we sync the data? So I'm assuming Veeam backs it up over here, stores it in S3, and when I make the decision to fail over, read it out of that S3 and replay it?
Precisely, yep. So we use S3 almost as our pivot point. So that's using object lock, we know that's a known good. So we have our backup data there. When we want to go restore onto our public cloud, we can pull that right out of S3.
Much more of a combined elegant dance between Veeam and say Rackham, because Rackham's going to say, oh, I'm going to bring that workload up over here, interact with MCM, trigger the restore of all of the data into the environment, and potentially decommission it over here. Right. Obviously this can be manually done, this can be human interacted, but we've got some options around automation here.
Absolutely.
We can talk about hybrid architectures and the nuances of hybrid implementations for the better part of 2 weeks, but is there anything from a DR Veeam perspective that we have glossed over and maybe need to zoom in on?
I think we've highlighted all the key points. I just want to underscore that, in terms of a hybrid cloud approach, Veeam Kasten can work across your organization's infrastructure, public cloud, on-premises. So we really can be that conduit for both data protection, disaster recovery, and mobility. So worth noting, for more information, definitely check out validatedpatterns.io. My colleague has one published up there specifically around Rackham and Kasten on OpenShift. But beyond that, be sure to check out veeamkasten.dev for a number of practical examples on a blog and for some interactive demos as well.
We'll add a myriad of links and things into the description of the video, so enjoy the journey and see where it takes you. But certainly if you are utilizing Kubernetes, if you are in a hybrid context, absolutely check out Veeam Kasten as part of your approach. I think there are some things here that could really simplify the world for you. Matt, thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure having you here.
Awesome. Very happy to be here. Thank you guys. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day.